Hello, everyone. Caresoft Technology would like to welcome you to our SailPoint webinar, It's All About the Data. This webinar is the first of an 8-part webinar series. If you're interested in learning more about the series, reach out to Caresoft. Our contact information will be displayed at the end of the webinar. Make sure you're keeping an eye out for information regarding the upcoming webinars soon. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few agenda items. All of your lines have been muted to reduce background noise, and we hope you take advantage of the Q&A pod on the left side of your screen. We will do our best to answer all of your questions at the end of the presentation. If for some reason we do not get to your presentation, we will follow up with you offline. Caresoft is a trusted IT solutions provider delivering software and support solutions to federal, state, and local government agencies. Caresoft maintains dedicated teams to support sales and marketing for all of its vendors, including SailPoint, VMware, Dell Technologies, Adobe, and Red Hat. Our contact information will be at the end of the presentation, so please don't hesitate to call or email us for any of your needs. This webinar is being recorded, and a copy of it will be emailed to you. At this time, I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Matt Topper, President and Solutions Catalyst at UberEther. Matt, the floor is all yours.
Hey, thank you so much. Appreciate it. So yeah, as we said, this is an 8-part webinar series. When we were working with the SailPoint team to put this together, we really wanted to give everyone an opportunity to really walk through how identity governance projects run, how we onboard new customers, new data sources, begin doing joiner, mover, leaver processes, and then also give people an opportunity to ask questions about their own implementations and kind of give us a stump the chump 10 minutes at the end of the presentation. So these are going to be real quick hit events over the next few months here. About 20 minutes of content and then 10 minutes of Q&A. As things move forward, please feel free to submit your questions, submit any new topics you'd like to discuss. I'm more than happy to extend or change the series as we all go. And if you've got existing problems on projects you're working on, feel free to bring those as questions that we can all learn from each other at the end as well. So as we said, we will send a recording of this at the end, put in Q&A. I'll be watching the chat window throughout. And with that, we'll get started. So it's all about the data. Personally, my background before getting into identity and access management was in data warehousing. And this is one of the challenges I see when we're starting identity governance projects over and over again. Many organizations jump straight into, let's work on the business processes. Let's look at how people are joining, how they're leaving, how they're changing jobs, and really don't take the time to look at the back-end data sources, the quality of that data. We've all been doing this long enough where, oh yeah, that field should be true or false. Oh, I forgot 5 years ago when we did that migration, it could also be T or F or 1 or 0. So a lot of organizations will jump in making the assumptions without looking at that data quality, as well as looking towards other systems in the organization that really can help them drive some of those business processes. So this is, you can see at the bottom of each of these slides, we have some facts or just quick tips that you can use when you're working in your own organizations. And this is one of my favorite from Gartner, that implementations that start with data cleanup from day one will show twice the return on investment as the ones that don't. So today we'll run through, talk about HR, talk about building a data governance team as well as data stewards, and then some other additional data sources to look for employee data, as well as moving beyond employees and even beyond humans. So real quick about me, been doing identity and access management implementations in the federal space for about 20 years now. I'm an architect, a developer, and most importantly, a pitmaster. So that's been my fun in the quarantine time. So with that, normally when we start a project in identity governance, everyone is looking to gain efficiencies with employees joining their organization when they move to a new position, take away their old access, provision them the new access, And then in many cases, one of the most important pieces that a lot of organizations don't do too great on is taking that access away when somebody leaves. So in most organizations, that will be your HR system, right? That's where we're going to get the person name attributes, the type of employee they are, which organization they belong to, if they're in HR, which access to what applications do they get just by being part of the HR system, who their manager is, right? That's extremely important as we're going through approval processes in most organizations. So if I'm making access requests to an application, we're going to, in most cases, route it to either their manager and or the application owner. So those type of things get driven out of the HR system. A status of, hey, is this person active? Are they on a long-term leave? Maybe they're on a medical leave. We've even had some customers where it's a legal leave. Um, and right, we get that status information from HR. When is their start date, right? We want to be able to predict when people are starting on their first day and send their manager an email with the person's password if they're not using PivotCAC outside of a government space to log in that first day. We don't want their accounts created ahead of time because that's actually an opportunity for account compromise. And then their end dates, right? Has this person said they're going to move on to a new opportunity, or do we have a RIF coming where we need to know when to turn off these accounts? And things like position codes as well that also help drive a lot of that attribute information. So one of the things that we see a lot of organizations struggle with as they give out HR access is they give the developers of the ICAM system a wide open access, a wide open service account to all of the HR data. Guess what? You just exposed all of your employee social security numbers, all of their bank account information, all of their payroll information. So now they know what their coworkers are making. I'm truly amazed how many times that happens. And with that, one of the major parts of success that we always push forward with our customers is to build a data dictionary. And with a data dictionary, build a data governance team. The data governance team is someone that will look at the data attributes across the organization, where they're being used, how they're being used, list the ways that that data is being used. They're working across privacy, they're working across legal, they're working across HR, they're watching even international policies, right? We've had GDPR in Europe, we have new legislation in California, as well as I think 20 other states right now to give people the right to be forgotten, and that includes employees as well. So you really have to build this data governance team to look at the data that's being shown and then have them build a data dictionary, right? You've got a centralized source for a lot of very important information coming into the SailPoint systems and then being consumed by applications downstream or provisioned into those applications. So people need to know, okay, what do we use supervisors for? Well, you're not going to use it for audit information. You're not going to use it for access information. You're not going to use it for ingest information to correlate data, but you are going to use it for discovery because you might want to route something to the person's manager. You're going to use a unique identifier for ingest to be able to correlate, oh, in this system, in the HR system, here's their employee ID. And then inside of the security system, we use that same employee ID, right? A lot of government agencies, that's the EDIPI or the FASN. So extremely important to get this as part of the process up front. And then, hey, the goal is don't put PII data into your identity governance system. Leave that lie where it needs to be. If it needs to come in, how do we govern it? How do we encrypt it? Where can we use it? Is it something that's only used for ingest that can be correlation? Because, right, that's how we look up the person in JPass or the security system, DIS as it's coming now, right? But outside of that, we're not allowed to push that data out to other systems. So really a good thing to start thinking about as you're building out your identity governance teams. So some other sources of data for employees that we regularly see. So location information, right? Which building well, we're all at our home offices at this point in most cases. But when we're back in the office, which locations are we allowed to be into, right? That might integrate with the PACS system and determine what doors I'm allowed in, what part of the building am I allowed in the data center, am I not allowed in the data center. If I'm at this location, maybe I get added to a list that I get the weekly lunch menu, right? So that's some things that we see coming in. A lot of times we see that the HR system doesn't actually turn off the person on a regular basis. And it's sometimes weeks until after the person has left that we actually see that they have an end date. But guess what? That payroll system, that gets updated pretty quick because they stop paying that person. So you might want to look beyond just your HR if your payroll system's not integrated to maybe pull in some of that data. Or, hey, we have HR is active and payroll is inactive. Send a note over to their manager saying, hey, this person's not going to get paid. Let's help them out. And did you roll them off? Or are they still here and we got to fix a data issue before the next payroll's run? On the opposite side of that problem, the applicant tracking system, right? A lot of times we're seeing things like USA Jobs or external services like a Workday that have, hey, here's all the resumes that came in, here's the people we're hiring, and that's where the start date of the person's being put instead of the HR system. Or if it's getting synchronized into HR, sometimes that takes 2 or 3 weeks to update that data, right? That might be a place to look for additional data on employees. Your physical access control, your badging systems, right? Not only when a person comes on board, do you want to push their account into those systems and say they're able to have access, and maybe take that location information that's joined in and tell the physical access control system where they're being pushed or where their primary work location is, but also monitor the PAC system. A lot of times we see badges taken away at the front door, and then the security guard will disable the badge because somebody's done something or they're no longer with the organization and they get handed the badge as the person's being walked out the door. Well, sometimes that data takes a while to get back into HR, get back into the payroll system, and that PACS data, same type of thing. Hey, this person's badge has been deactivated. Do you want to turn them off? Do you want to keep them on? Or, hey, their badge is expiring in 3 weeks, right? If we have PKI certificates on those badges to do CAC authentication, hey, they're expiring in 3 weeks. Send the person a reminder, right? There might be other systems that are doing reminders, or might not be. But hey, if you don't do this in a week, you're not going to be able to get in the building, log in anymore, right? And with SailPoint, you can customize those messages that go out as well and give them an access directly to schedule the renewal. And then also the training data. This is something that a lot of organizations have been moving towards, right? In government, we have annual information awareness training, acceptable use policy training within most organizations, and other training to get access to specific systems. So pulling that data in and making that part of your identity governance process, saying, hey, if you don't take your acceptable use training within the next 2 weeks, we're going to disable your access to all the accounts. And then we're going to tattletale on you. And a week out, tell your manager. 3 days out, tell your manager and you. And then on that day when their training does expire, put them in an OU inside of Active Directory that only lets them go to the training system and complete that training before they can do anything else. Right. So, and then certain applications have certain trainings that are prerequisites. So inside of the SailPoint tool, we can tell them, hey, if you want access to this, that's great, but you have to go complete this training first. And then that data will flow in to the identity governance system. And the next time they come back, say, oh, yep, you're good. You've passed your training. Go ahead and do this. Or, oh, you're requesting this, but you need to renew your training in the next week because we'll give it to you, but we'll take it away. So those are some other sources for employee data. Some of this also bleeds over into other types of users. So with that, start thinking beyond employees as well. And this is where a lot of organizations start to realize that the HR system isn't the centralized source for everything, right? So a lot of times most organizations are heavy on contractors. No matter if you're commercial, government, SLED, right? And with that, we see two models. Normally, you have project-driven models. So you have a contracts management system. You might have an employee that is the contracting officer representative or the contracting officer that is assigned to that contract. And then you've got an ERP system that is assigning people to those contracts. And I'll dive into a little bit of that on the next slide and how that works. The other model we see often is a vendor-driven approach to contractor management. So you might hire UberEther to come on board and assign an UberEther administrator, and then they're responsible for registering our employees that'll be working on the different contracts within the organization. Even inside of government, we've seen this model, both of these models, moving forward. You've got external vendors. Everything, as Target saw with their HVAC vendor, who is actually where their major hack a few years ago came through. You need to manage all of those outside firms, their physical access control to your facilities. They've got access to some of the devices inside of your organization. If you're in education, the students, your customers and consumers of your products, external partners, right? As you have major organizations or other agencies that are working with you to do information sharing and collaboration. How do you manage all of those people coming in? A lot of times you might have a trust, like between your identity providers, or have a federation in between your organizations. And when a new employee comes over from that other partner organization, how do you deal with them? How do you know what you need to provision accounts for them, and managing that? And then also visitor request access, right? You've got your daily visitors that might need an escort, but you also have long-term visitors that might be in your organization for weeks or months, depending on what's going on. Maybe you've got a proof of concept going on with one of your vendors that needs to be a visitor, and they need access to some internal SharePoint sites to do information sharing. So those are all different groups of people that we're seeing come into the identity governance systems. And as you can see, for contractors, about 10% are on multiple contracts at the same time, and managing their access across multiple contracts gets difficult as well. And then most organizations, we go into 15% of the contractors that are active in their Active Directory are no longer assigned to active contracts and should be disabled. And then 20% of those contracts, the contracting officer or the contracting officer representative don't actually work for the organization anymore, or their accounts have been disabled, or they've moved on to new positions where they don't run those contracts anymore. So back to that data quality that we talked about in the data governance teams, managing some of that in the beginning. So for all of these external human beings, some of the typical sources we see are your enterprise resource planning systems, right? Those are typically fall outside of your HR system. Your contracts management system. So with your contracts management system, we get things like who's your contracting officer representative, which in most cases, any person you assign to that contract, any contractor you assign to that contract, the contracting officer representative becomes their manager. With that, you also have end dates that normally come with those contracts. Right, and we've got another part of this series on managing contracts and managing extensions and overrides and all that fun stuff. But right, you've got waiver processes at the end of the year. But really, when it's the last day of a contractor's contract and it's the last contract they're working on with you, you want to disable their accounts, and all of that data is driven from contractor management. As I mentioned, you might have federated access and identity providers from other partners that you're working with, other vendors you're working with. And when their people come over through either a SAML or an OpenID Connect connection, they've got attributes and roles that come with them. How do those attributes and roles get back into your identity governance system? And then use that to create them accounts internally to allow that collaboration that you're looking for. Your customer relationship management systems, whether that's a Salesforce or any of the other big vendors, your Active Directory system, right? Most organizations, hey, I need a guest account. Oh, call the help desk and ask for it. So that sometimes becomes your authoritative source of record. And then your security systems like JPass and DIS if you're in the government space. And at the end of the day, sadly, a lot of this is built into email that says email that group, email this team, email that organization, and finding where those emails go and finding out what those processes are and pulling them out is a lot of the work a lot of times. So that kind of covers humans. And in the last, I would say about 3-4 years, there's been a major push to go beyond humans inside of identity governance systems. Especially in the last year, we've seen a lot of push around bots. And bots, in my opinion, is a pretty loaded term, but we're seeing a lot of RPA or remote process automation capabilities from vendors like UiPath and Blue Prism. We're even seeing bots pop up inside of websites at schools to allow students to reset their passwords, right? And if that bot has an ability to connect to your Active Directory and reset a password, chances are you want to give it an owner and you want to give it permissions just like you would a human and control those permissions and who has the ability to read them and use them, and not just give them open access to your Active Directory, because if that gets compromised, then you've got a major problem on your hands because they basically have a root or God account to connect your Active Directory. Similarly, working with your access management vendors, your API gateway vendors, your cloud vendors to manage API keys and certificates. Again, they need owners. If you're giving out an API key to one of your partner organizations, you're probably going to want to have business contacts that are associated with that account and those API keys. You're going to want to have technical contacts over there with those accounts and API keys so that if you have to rotate them or you have to communicate with them and say, hey, there's something going on weird with your API. We're getting this from an outside system, right? Or, hey, we need to refresh these keys and drive that through your identity governance system. You need to manage all of those things and think about that type of data as well. And then finally, service accounts, right? We've got cron jobs that run all over our organizations, API keys, usernames and passwords that connect between these applications, database accounts. A lot of times these are wrapped into your privileged access management tools with CyberArk, BeyondTrust, and Thycotic. So each one of those accounts needs an owner, needs someone to govern it, needs someone to request access on behalf of all of these non-human identities, non-person identities, as we typically call them inside of government. So just more data to think about as you're bringing in into your identity governance solution. And we'll go into over the next series how this data affects the different processes and procedures of bringing on employees, bringing on contractors, managing non-humans, getting into zero trust. But this is really just setting up some of those data sources you might look at for that discussion. So key takeaways from today's event. For employees, look beyond HR. Your employee data is everywhere and across a lot of different systems. Make sure you're using that identity or data governance team and your data stewards to really understand where the data lives in your organization, and pull that in. Look beyond just your employees. Don't forget about your contractors, your partners, students, constituents, if you're a local government, and other associates that work with your organization. Beyond humans, look towards non-person identities, service accounts, bots. Work closely with those data stewards. I can't say it enough. They know where all the bodies are buried, and they know where all the data that drives your organization is. And if they don't exist, you need to make that as part of your identity governance team to be successful. And at the same time, this is a lot of data from a lot of different places, which has probably decades of history within your organization. Embrace the simple solutions. Understand where this data is, but build yourself a roadmap that pulls it in over time and at a really manageable pace, right? We've got to balance that showing business value, driving digital transformations in our organizations forward, as well as bringing in all of this data. So it's a careful balance that we struggle with on a daily basis, but normally the simplest solutions are the best solutions. So with that, we'll open the floor for questions. I know we've only got a couple minutes left here, and I went a little longer than I thought I was. So um, feel free to ask away if you want to pop some things in chat. All right. Well, it looks like we had one question come in about organizations that are looking at zero trust and what data is important as this efforts can move forward. So, right, zero trust is a pretty loaded term. There's a lot of things to zero trust. What I see coming into identity governance solutions around zero trust and beyond corp models is additional authenticators for users. Right, if somebody is new to an organization, maybe their risk score is higher, and we can use that as part of driving. We're also seeing the data within IGA solutions like SailPoint go out and be pushed into zero trust models to do nearest neighbor advanced analytics. And I think the biggest part with zero trust is figuring out how those devices, how those additional authenticators all come in, and you can use those to drive different decisions and different access levels. But yeah, like I said, a lot of it is taking the data from inside and pushing it out. So Andy had a question. Best process for normalizing identity data and aggregation from several IDPs. We typically, and this is probably a history of my life in data warehousing before this, is normalizing the data into what is as flat as possible. And a lot of times that is building either a data warehouse or using tools like a virtual directory on the outside to aggregate all of this data together into a centralized single, if you've been around the CDM program, the term master user record view. And then using those tools to really flatten all of these external data sources into one view of the user. And then you can do things like one I mentioned at the beginning, true, false, TF, 1, 0, using those external data warehousing capabilities or virtual directory capabilities to strip out the bad data or transform that data so it does only show true or false. Or if there's data not as part of your data steward and your data governance team that is populated into those fields, to ignore it, right? And that's all part of that process of building your data dictionary. And if that data comes from several IDPs, like I said, use something on the outside to bring that together and aggregate it in a centralized source before pulling that into SailPoint, especially as you grow into larger organizations in the 50, 100 millions of users, especially with the way the business changes and those sources changes, and even in mergers and acquisitions. That's a very successful model that we've used in the past and the one we lead with most customers. So hopefully that answers your question, Andy. And then the only other thing that had come in was some approaches for data quality and the success of the program. So we do have an upcoming series on that, but I will say as these systems are growing and the amount of data that's coming into them is growing, the amount of systems we're connecting to with a bunch of new cloud providers coming on, a lot of new SaaS providers that we're connecting to, I think a lot of the data quality is going to start moving towards AI and other machine learning type analytics tools, which I know SailPoint has some great solutions around in the government or in the market as well, and some of the industry leading ones right now. Role mining has for a very long time been a continuous, forever ongoing process that never ends, right? Our businesses never stop evolving. We never stop acquiring new tools and applications. And AI and machine learning, especially around identity and access management, has gotten to a point that we can actually use that to dynamically figure out the best roles and entitlements for people And I think that's probably going to be the most successful approaches for most moving forward. So I think we'll hold for another minute or so here. Then, as they said, this is a 8-part series, and keep your eyes open for the next part. The next one, we will start diving into managing contractors, which is one of my favorite topics because there's a lot of complexity. Or I'm sorry, the next one is accelerating access to applications and onboarding them quickly. So we've been able to onboard 400 applications in a customer in a year through some of the tools that we've built with SailPoint and some best practices around how to accelerate and build teams to onboard those applications more quickly. And then we'll get into governing contractors a little bit later. So with that, I think those are all the questions for today. Julia or Catherine, did you want to come back on, or should we close this out?
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Matt, for the presentation. I'd also like to thank all of our participants for being with us today. We hope this webinar has been very helpful for you and your organization. As a reminder, this webinar has been recorded and a copy of the presentation will be emailed to you. If we were unable to answer any of your questions, we'll reach out to you offline to follow up. But if you have any further questions or would like to request more information, feel free to contact the SailPoint team here at Caresoft. Our contact information is being displayed on your screen, so please don't hesitate to call or email us. Thank you. Have a great day.